Hi, my name is Robin Manuel, and in this short video I'm going to take you through how I turn an experience, a story, something that's happened to me into a punchy, engaging performance. And if you've never done anything like that before, then I can imagine that can be quite overwhelming. In this video, I'm going to give you just some small ideas that will help you break up the process so it isn't so overwhelming, give you some simple things that you can do right now to get started. If you're a seasoned communicator and you're used to turning experiences and stories into a performance, then I hope listening to this you'll get some ideas and some ways of reflecting on your own creative practice that will be useful to you, particularly in the context of collaborating with others. So if you've never done this before, then it can be a bit of an overwhelming experience. But don't worry, you just have to take it one slice of cake at a time. You don't have to eat the whole cake all at once. Set your own level of challenge. If this is something new to you, then realise that you can just take simple steps, and as you feel more confident about what you're doing, you'll begin to be able to take bigger risks and to know just how far you're prepared to go. So that said, when you first start off, it's important to protect your personal space, to give yourself a space to be creative in. Everyone has an opinion and they're going to want to share their opinion with you. To begin with, share with people who are interested in yours, who are going to give you the time and space to really get into what this means to you. Now, I want to address the question of fear head on, because we all do get afraid. And there are practical reasons to be afraid. Well, I've never done this kind of thing before. I don't know how the audience is going to take it. It won't be good enough. People will think that I'm ridiculous or stupid. I'll say something that means they won't like me. I'll be too vulnerable in front of them. They won't care at all. Nobody will really notice. There are lots of things that we can be afraid of. But what if you just decide to do the thing anyway and confront your fear head on using this handy chart? So for everything that you're afraid might happen, think through, what's the worst case scenario? If that worst thing really happened, how would you recover from it? What would you do to get your confidence back, to feel that you'd done something valuable, you'd learnt some lessons, and that you could move on to the next thing? And most importantly, how can you prevent that from happening? Because if you're imagining a worst case scenario, you're not just imagining a still picture. There's a video there that explains how you get to that worst case scenario. And if you can imagine that, you can imagine the steps that you could take along the way that are going to prevent that worst case scenario from happening in the first place. So go through all your fears, ask yourself, what am I afraid will or will not happen? What's the worst case scenario? And how would you recover if that happened? And most importantly, ask yourself, how can you prevent that from happening? When you've done that, you'll probably have a much more realistic idea of what it's worth putting nervous energy into. And ask yourself finally, what's the cost of not doing this? If I don't take this risk, if I don't take this challenge, what will happen? What will happen if I just carry on the way I'm going? Is that okay? What's the cost of not doing this? And if you do it, what other benefits are you going to get? What else is that going to give you? Because overcoming your fear might help you feel more confident. You might meet people and realise that other people share your common interests. You might realise you have skills and abilities that you didn't think you did. So, get your fear out of the way in one go using this handy chart. So, one way of breaking up the whole creative process is to look at it as a cycle of 3 stages: dreaming, making and evaluating. And as we go through the process, the creative process, we move through these stages in a cycle. So I find this model is really useful in 2 cases. One, if I'm working by myself, then it helps me be clear about where exactly in the creative process I am. Because if I want to, imagine something crazy and imaginative, then there's no point me judging myself and criticising myself before I've even allowed myself to get started. I'm just mixing up the stages. I like to just reassure myself that the critic and the maker and the dreamer are all going to get their chance to have a go at this process. The second case in which I find it really useful is when I'm working with other people. Knowing where exactly we are in the creative cycle, from what point of view we're coming, can help to build understanding and to avoid misunderstandings and unhelpful feedback. So when you're dreaming, you're creating choices, you're imagining possibilities, you're imagining impossibilities, you're generating ideas, creating variety, extending and exploring the territory. When you're making choices, you're bringing together into some kind of scratch form or written draft, perhaps a new recording of your performance. You're solving practical problems and testing your ideas. You're making work. And in that third stage, you're evaluating. You're looking, listening to what you've created. You're thinking about what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't work. You're asking, what else does this need for you to be complete? What else does it need for your audience? Are there things that you can remove and get rid of? If you have the glimmer of an idea right now and you want to turn that into a performance, realize there's just a sequence of steps you need to go through and enjoy the journey. Enjoy each of these different stages for what they are. If you're ready to start turning your story into a performance, here are 3 lenses, 3 tools for looking at your story, your experience, and for just pulling out some of the deeper meaning and turning it from something that is just a personal experience into something that has that epic story-like form that we recognise when we see it on the stage. As I share these ideas with you, bear in mind that they're just a place to start. You may have very different ideas of how you want to present your piece, but I do think that exploring these simple ideas can help you pull out what's really important in your work. So the hero's journey comes from the work of Joseph Campbell, and there are really complicated versions of this. I've given you a fairly simple one there, which is self-explanatory. I've found that it's useful to just boil this down into 5 sets of questions, and they're on the right-hand side for you there. What's your passion for this? How do you feel about the experience now? Why do you want to tell this story? And how do you want the audience to feel? This is about connecting yourself emotionally to this story and understanding what you have to bring to it and why you want to tell it. The second thing you want to ask yourself is, who's the hero and who's the antagonist? The hero is obviously that person, that character in the story that we identify with as an audience. They're the ones whose journey we're following. And the antagonist is the enemy, the person who we fight, the person who we have conflict with. Now, if you're telling a personal anecdote, the hero may very well be you, and that seems fair enough to me. Why shouldn't you be the hero in your own story? But it can be interesting to make somebody else the hero, perhaps even the antagonist the hero. It's certainly worth, while you're in the dreaming phase, exploring those possibilities and looking at the story from that point of view. Similarly, the antagonist may be an actual person, something or someone in your story, but it could equally well be the hero's own flaw, the hero's own emotional block or anger or fear. And there will be a literal element to your story, there will be actual things that happen, and there will be a figurative or metaphorical journey that's taking place at the same time. The third thing to ask yourself about your story, pull out, what is the struggle here? What emotions are at play? What's at stake? What can be won? What can be lost? And how does the conflict play out? And you might have 2 things going on here. Again, you might have a literal struggle with an actual character in your story, or you might have a figurative struggle, the conflict that's going on internally. And hopefully those 2 things will somehow resonate with each other. 4, there's going to be some kind of epiphany, realization. There's going to be a key that unlocks the door, that makes possible the change that the hero needs to succeed, to fulfill their quest. And that realization is going to lead to a transformation. The hero is going to be transformed in some way, and that change is going to transform the world. So have a think with your story. Ask yourself, what is your passion for this? Who's the hero? Who's the antagonist? What's the struggle? What's the realization? And what is the transformation that occurs? Take a moment to exaggerate, to distort it, to make your story epic. You can always pull back and bring it down to the everyday and mundane, but stretching the boundaries, allowing yourself to be kind of mythical, will help create something in your story that is universal and that resonates with other people. That's my theory anyway. So the second thing that I want you to take to look for and to really play around with is any imagery, any striking and compelling imagery that emerges as you're thinking about your story. When you're performing, when people are listening to you, they're responding in a conscious way and they're responding in an unconscious way. They're responding to the words that you say, but they're also responding to the feelings and the images and the movement that you're projecting to them. And really compelling stories combine this ability to resonate on two levels. Beneath the literal events of the story, there's some kind of metaphorical truth unfolding. And I'm reminded of Carl Jung's quote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The journey of the hero is so often about this battle with fate, with what we can control and with what we can't control. And as you think about your story, think about what is this really about? What else is this about? What other experiences is this experience like? What is the truth that you're hiding behind the cloak of this story? If I close the door on somebody in my story, I can be literally closing the door on them, but I can be figuratively closing the door on my past, or closing the door on a bad element in my life, or closing the door on a future possibility that I'm too afraid to take. Finally, 3-act structure. If the first 2 slides were about helping you to create choices, this is probably about helping you make choices and pull things together as you create a draft or a scratch performance. And this will be very familiar to you. It's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It's beginning, middle, end. And in the beginning, you set up the situation. There's some kind of inciting incident that starts the whole struggle. There's the middle, which is the struggle taking place, the journey, the confrontation, whatever it is. And then finally, there's the end. There's the climax where the hero takes some kind of action and there's some kind of resolution and change in the world. And you can see there with the diagram below how kind of tension rises and falls over the arc of that 3-act structure. There's a really useful storytelling exercise for just getting the main thing, the absolute skeleton structure for your story in place. And that is to start off by giving yourself just 3 paragraphs in which to tell the entire story. The beginning paragraph, the middle paragraph, and the end paragraph. When you can do that, give yourself a sentence for each beginning, middle, and end, and tell the story in 3 sentences. And finally, tell the whole story in 1 sentence. Try that out a few different ways with a few different emphases and see which you like best. So, my name is Robin Manuel. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to this and some of the lessons here are being useful to you. If you want help developing your story, then get in touch via my Facebook page, Robin Manuel. Look forward to hearing from you. Enjoy the rest of your day.